Talked before about the importance of maintenance. I think there's some self-evidence around that, but how much is right? Our industry is by and large driven by attendance. It's not driven by performance outcomes. We're not like industry where the level of maintenance is provided directly proportional to how the age of the equipment and how important the equipment is. We pretty much do the same thing every month from a compliance perspective. It's relatively simplistic. In some ways, I can use a car analogy, which I'll come back to a little bit later on. It'd be like taking your car to the dealer, and the dealer changes the oil and checks the belts, but doesn't make sure the thing's tuned properly. That's effectively the sort of maintenance we do in buildings around HVAC typically. And we can get away with that because of what I said before. HVAC systems are pretty much very resilient. They'll work, not work well, but they'll keep working for some time. Mentioned just at the bottom there around change, and we'll talk a lot more about change next week, but managing change in buildings around HVAC systems can be quite challenging. At one end, a component fails. So do you just do a like-for-like replacement? That's typically what we do. That's what we're set up to do. But is that the best thing? That was installed 15 years ago. The building's use has changed. The new kit's 20% more energy efficient if you do certain things. How do you make the decision? But the thing's failed. We have to have it fixed by Monday. You've got to plan for those sorts of things, and clearly as an industry, we don't do a lot of that. At the other end of the scale, if you're looking at doing a significant upgrade or a retrofit for a HVAC system, it can be quite a complex process because you've got a lot of stakeholders involved, especially in an occupied building. How do you make sure the thing keeps working while you change it floor at a time? So some quite challenging issues around change that we'll talk about a bit more next week. Obviously, environmental impact is an underlying focus of the 1200 Buildings program and today, and more next week on that as well. But a couple of, I suppose, key issues, measuring and metering. I'm sure pretty much everybody in the room has been along to energy efficiency presentations ad nauseum over the last couple of years, and the first thing any expert up on the stage says, you've got to get your measuring and your metering and your reporting right. You've got to be able to measure it before you can manage it. I'm not going to say anything different because that is absolutely the essence of the thing. The more you know about how your building consumes energy, the more you will do about it, and the more you will make sure what you do about it works. There's really no substitute for that. Supply contracts are an interesting thing. Back in the mid-90s when in this state the SEC was broken up and sold off, we got all very excited about supply contracts and linking the nature of the supply contract to how we use the energy. We seem to have forgotten a lot of that. But clearly going forward, there's some key changes happening in the electricity supply and the gas industry. We'll see a lot more time of use tariffs and a lot more requirement or opportunity to actually either adjust your load or shift your load. So when I say time of use tariff, the kilowatt you buy at 2 o'clock on a February afternoon will cost you a lot more than the kilowatt that you'll buy at 2 o'clock in the morning on the same day. So again, trying to level out the demand that HVAC systems put upon the electricity system as such. So the ability to move load will be important going forward. For the technical people in the room, a return to things like ice storage and chill water storage, the ability to put a battery in a building in a thermal sense. The other issue that is quite often a drama around energy efficiency and energy and water consumption in buildings is knowing what's possible. And the great challenge in all that when you get right to the bottom of is veracity. I've got a consultant and they've told me that we can do this in the building and it's going to cost that and save me this. I've got a contractor who thinks we can do that. Veracity. How do you actually prove the truthfulness of what they're saying and the surety of outcome? We've got things like energy performance contracts and a whole range of things which attempt to deal with that. But at the end of the day, there is no substitute for the person who's making the decision to have adequate understanding to come back and test the veracity of themselves. When you go and buy a car and the dealer makes a whole range of claims about that car, you effectively yourself get to a point where you can test that veracity. You don't go and get a consultant to give you some advice. So again, it's about better understanding around those things.